He rejected the confessions of all the girls in the school, saying that I was his only rose. But on my birthday, he left me alone in the mountains. He said, "Yo-Yo will get angry if she sees you. Can you be more sensible?" When I was standing on the mountaintop, shivering in the cold wind and getting drenched, he was holding the person in his arms and cooing softly, "You're the one I hold dear to my heart." "What is she?" I laughed, and decisively threw the ring in my hand off the cliff. The ring was gone, and I didn't want him anymore. It was the third birthday that Brian spent with me. His first love returned from abroad. He promised to take me to watch the meteor shower, but the moment he received the call, he left me and was in a hurry to go. I reached out and grabbed him, saying unhappily, "Can't someone else go and pick her up?" Brian stopped in his tracks, turned around to look at me, and said with a frown and a deep voice, "Can you be more sensible? You can watch the stars any day. Yo-Yo's in a bad mood. She only has me. I can't just ignore her." I thought it was ridiculous, but I still held onto the corner of his clothes tightly and compromised. "Then I'll go with you." His face darkened, his brows knitted in annoyance, and his tone was impatient. "Stop making trouble, okay? Yo-Yo will be unhappy if she sees you. You'll only be a nuisance if you go." I was stunned, then let go of my hand and looked at him in disbelief. Seeing this, Brian sighed, rubbed my head, and softened his voice. "Baby, I don't mean anything else. I promise I'll come back to accompany you right after I deal with things there. Be good, don't be petty, okay?" After that, he opened the door and got into the car without looking back. I trotted forward and shouted at him, "Well, you should at least give me a ride back. Leaving me alone in this wilderness, what kind of thing is this?" Brian started the car, glanced at me, and seemed to be angry and amused at the same time. "Summer, don't be unreasonable. I'll send someone to pick you up." As soon as the words fell, the car sped down the mountain and soon disappeared. I stood there alone. Night fell, and the evening wind made me shiver. Half an hour passed, and the person who was supposed to pick me up still hadn't arrived. Clouds were churning in the distance, and it seemed like it was going to rain. I looked at the message I sent to Brian on my phone. There was no response. The video call I made to him wasn't answered either. He used to reply instantly. I felt a faint sense of unease in my heart. Just as I was about to call a car myself, I received a video. Brian was holding the person in his arms, coaxing her gently as if she were some rare treasure. "Yo-Yo, you're the one I hold dear to my heart. What is Summer? She's not even worthy of being a substitute. She's just a little thing for entertainment." On the quiet mountaintop, Brian's gentle yet piercing words echoed. A little thing for entertainment. I curled my lips self-deprecatingly. I remembered when we first got together, I asked him about his first love. He said indifferently, "There's nothing to talk about." I was young and naive back then. "She's the daughter of our family's nanny. She was sent abroad by my mom just a couple of days after we got together. Baby, you're the first person who makes my heart flutter." His words dispelled the only concern in my heart. Because people in the circle said that the young master of the Jing circle was abstinent and stayed away from women for the sake of his first love who went abroad. It turned out that it was all a rumor. Now it seems that I was the only one being deceived. I forcefully took off the ring on my right middle finger and threw it forward with all my might. It fell off the cliff, disappearing without a sound. The words, "Till death do us part," unswerving in loyalty, also dissipated. The mountain wind messed up my hair. My face felt cold as raindrops fell on my face and arms one after another. A bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the wind, swept woods and me standing alone on the cliff. The heavy rain came suddenly. I was shivering from the cold, and my not fully recovered cold made me dizzy. What meteor shower, what only rose, it was all nonsense. The world, just like this lousy weather, can change in an instant. "Get in the car," a voice sounded abruptly. I was forcefully pulled and stuffed into the car. "Why are you here?" I took off the towel that was thrown over my head and looked at the man in the driver's seat. He was wearing a pair of gold-rimmed glasses on his nose, looking extremely noble and elegant. He was staying abroad well. Why did he suddenly come back to the country? Max focused on driving, turned the air conditioner up a few degrees, and looked ahead, saying, "I was just afraid you'd commit suicide for love and there'd be no one to bury you." His tone was as cold as ever, with a hint of sarcasm. Thinking of Brian's betrayal, I felt a lump in my chest. As I wiped my hair, I said, "I won't be so melodramatic for love. The one who betrayed should be punished." "Wow," Max glanced at me, surprised. "Seems I underestimated you. I wonder who it was who was making a scene and insisting on calling off the engagement with me for that man." Max sneered, his eyes full of meaning. The car fell silent for a moment, only the sound of rain hitting the car window crackling. After my parents passed away one after another, I was only 12. Uncle Max took me home and took good care of me. But Max always taunted me, "Is shamelessness hereditary? How can you have the nerve to stay in my house? Don't call me brother. It's so annoying to hear, don't say you know me outside." I feel disgusted. In my senior year of high school, Max returned from studying abroad. I passed by the study and heard him arguing loudly with Uncle Max. Damn arranged marriage. "I won't marry that bitch's daughter," a slap sounded. Uncle Max was furious. "Your mother's death was an accident. It has nothing to do with Aunt Lynn. If it weren't for your involvement with her, how could my mother have died?" Max roared hoarsely, "Whoever wants to marry the daughter of a murderer can marry her. I'd rather marry a dog than marry her." After that, a loud door slamming sound came. I huddled in the corner, trembling all over. The envelope in my hand was crumpled by me. A tear slid down from the corner of my eye. Only then did I know that he had always blamed my mother for Auntie's death. But I believed that my mother and Uncle Max were innocent. Not wanting to talk to Max, I slept all the way until we got off the car. Back home, Lucky happily rushed over, wagging its tail vigorously. It's a Samoyed I rescued from a dog dealer. It was thin and small at that time, but now it has grown into a beautiful big dog. Since Uncle Max passed away last year, I've been living with it and moved into the apartment my mother left me. After washing up, I packed all of Brian's things at home. If I want to break up, I'll do it completely. I went to the hotel where they were having a welcome back party. At the corner of the corridor, I heard someone mention me. "Summer is just so, she snorted disdainfully. "What 1 in a million? Brian still left her behind and came to me. I thought the charm of the school beauty was something special. Turns out it's effortless. It's so boring." Another person laughed and echoed, "Yo-yo, you're really something. No wonder they say first love is so powerful. Summer just relies on that seductive face to attract people. She's so arrogant. After being favored by young Master Brian, her tail is almost up to the sky. You should teach her a good lesson and show her who is the apple of young Master Brian's eye." I walked over and looked down at the two people leaning against the wall. One of them I knew. She used to be a crazy fan who confessed to Brian. She was so scared that the cigarette in her hand dropped. Looking at me, she said, "Summer, you should be trapped on the mountain." Oh, so that's why the car to pick me up was so late. It seems these two had something to do with it. Beside her, Yo-Yo was also staring at me. This was the first time I'd seen her. She had a small, delicate oval face and bright, lively eyes. We didn't look anything alike at all. No wonder I couldn't even be considered a substitute. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but smile. A flash of amazement and jealousy crossed Yo-Yo's eyes. She straightened her back, but was still shorter than me, and inevitably lost some of her imposing manner. Yo-Yo wasn't willing to show weakness. She sized me up and sneered, "So you're Summer. You're quite seductive. With such a talent for luring men, in ancient times, you'd surely be the top courtesan in a brothel." However, as you've heard, Brother Brian was just having fun with you. Don't blame him for being harsh. He just loves me too much." As she spoke, she laughed smugly again. "Out of consideration for your taking care of him for so long, I'll ask him to give you more money. Don't pester him anymore in the future." Presumably, she was the one who sent the video on my phone. It was really ridiculous. What first love, first love? A person who gets involved in someone else's relationship is nothing but a mistress. I crossed my arms over my chest, stared at her face, and said with a soft laugh, "I heard your mother was the nanny in Brian's family. Among the servants born in the family, were you more like a servant girl who washed feet, or a concubine's chambermaid?" "Oh, no," I shook my head and said, "You should be the low-born servant girl who seduced the young master and was kicked out of the house. Your brother Brian loves you so much. Why didn't he plead for you? Or is it that you only dared to slink back after his mother passed away?" Yo-Yo was so angry that her face turned livid. She flew into a rage and cursed at me harshly, "You're just a kept slut. We're the ones in true love. What right do you have to judge me? A mistress like you, who only has a pretty face and no one to love, isn't even worthy of tying my shoes." I suddenly raised my hand and slapped her hard. A clear slapping sound echoed through the corridor. Yo-Yo looked stunned, her eyes wide with disbelief. The girl next to her was also so shocked that her mouth fell open. Yo-Yo came to her senses, covered the bright red slap mark on her face, and stared at me fiercely. Her eyes flickered, then landed on my chest. Suddenly, she reached out and forcefully grabbed the jade pendant around my neck. My neck hurt, and I bent down, trying to pull her hand away forcefully, but she held on tightly. "Summer," Brian's voice sounded at the same time. Yo-Yo suddenly let go of her hand, leaned backward, hit the back of her head hard against the wall, and fell to the ground with a scream. "Does it hurt, Yo-Yo?" "Let me see." Brian rushed over, pushed me aside, and hugged Yo-Yo in his arms. I lost my balance and stumbled a few steps. The jade pendant around my neck suddenly came loose and smashed to the ground, breaking into pieces. It was a jade pendant for peace that my mother had prayed for me. Before she passed away, despite her illness, she knelt and crawled step by step to get it for me. Holding back my tears, before I could pick up the pieces on the ground, I was harshly scolded by Brian. "Summer, how could you become so vicious?" He tenderly comforted the person in his arms, looking at me with disappointment all over his face. "Brother Brian, I just wanted to apologize to her for you not being able to accompany her on her birthday. I didn't expect her to be so hostile to me. She called me a mistress, but I just love you so much. I'd rather die without you." Yo-Yo cried pitifully, speaking in a soft voice. "Apologize to Yo-Yo right now." Brian looked at me, his voice cold and stern. I looked at him with a cold laugh, opened the suitcase I brought, and emptied out the contents, which scattered messily on the ground. "I came here to break up with you. I'm returning your things. The ones I gave you can be thrown away. From now on, we're done." Brian was stunned, looking at the jewelry and accessories on the ground that were treated like trash in disbelief. He had carefully selected all of them. He looked up at me, frowning, his eyes filled with anger. He roared at me for the first time, "I've really spoiled you rotten, making you so unruly. You want to break up? Fine. Don't come crying and regretting it later." With that, Brian picked up Yo-Yo and left. Yo-Yo leaned on his shoulder and looked back at me with a contemptuous smile. I clenched my fists tightly, burning with anger. What good could a cheating man be? What good could a mistress be? I wanted to see how these two would ruin each other when they got together. Back home, I played with Lucky for a while. After lying on the bed, I tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep. I thought of my father. He was very busy at work, but he spent all his free time with my mother. They really loved each other. After my father died in the line of duty, my mother was depressed and passed away not long after. My father and Uncle Max were once comrades, in arms and had arranged a betrothal for us. The first time I saw Max, I had thought that if I were to be with him in the future, would we love each other like my parents did? But later I found out that he hated me and my mother. He never intended to marry me. My mother wasn't the kind of person, he said. No matter how much I explained or tried to please him, he hated me deeply. Later, I met Brian. He had a completely different personality from Max. He was sunny, enthusiastic, and very good to me. I'll always remember that rock climbing competition. The champion would be decided between me and another girl. When we were about to reach the top and determine the winner, she suddenly approached me. Before I could react, a sharp pain shot through the back of my hand. She inserted a thin silver needle into the back of my hand with great force. I had already exhausted a lot of energy, and with this shock, I almost lost my footing. I endured the pain and let go of the handhold. I swung her hand away, but unexpectedly, she fell straight down along with my movement. She insisted, she cheated and deliberately pushed me. I showed the thin needle mark on my arm and said, she pricked the back of my hand with a needle first. She deserved it. Since there was no surveillance, the people standing below only saw me pushing her, and the tiny needle she used to prick me was invisible. Everyone took her side, saying that I would stop at nothing to win the competition. She has an angel's face but a heart of a snake. Such a person being the school beauty is simply ruining the image of our school. They boasted about her being both talented and beautiful. Maybe her grades were also obtained through cheating. Good heavens, she even staged it herself, not hesitating to prick the back of her own hand to shift the blame. I was unable to defend myself. After Brian rushed over, he gently blew on the back of my hand, looking at that girl with a severe expression. You have one day to clear this up. Otherwise, you'll bear the consequences. Not long after, that girl posted a picture of the silver needle and the purchase record, as well as a surveillance video. In the video, she said to her little sister, I'll use this needle to prick her later. When she pushes my hand away, I'll fall down. If Brian knows how despicable she is, he'll surely dump her. After that, the girl was expelled from school. I was deeply touched. I held Brian's hand and asked him seriously, you trust me so much? Brian held my hand in return, looked at me with a smile, and said firmly, baby, you're my girlfriend. If I don't trust you, who else should I trust? Besides, even if you did it, it must be her fault. The feeling of being unconditionally trusted was wonderful. At that time, I thought I had found the love of my life and firmly believed that he would always stand behind me. But reality is always cruel. He changed. He wasn't the one I was supposed to spend my life with. Perhaps, I'm destined to be alone in this life, without family affection. 8. The next day when I went to school, Brian ran to our classroom to bring me breakfast. It was the steamed buns with soup from my favorite restaurant. The fact that he left me behind for Yo-Yo had spread throughout the school. Even the breakup I initiated was rumored to be that he dumped me because of his first love. I heard that he took her home last night. Now, he had an ingratiating look on his face, as if nothing had happened yesterday and we were still the same as before. Brian stared straight at me, his eyes full of anticipation. I glanced at him, then indifferently shifted my gaze, walked around him and headed outside. He quickly caught up, grabbed my wrist, and said with a playful smile, baby, are you still angry? I was just in a fit of anger yesterday. Forgive me this time, okay? He used a coquettish tone, thinking this was just like the previous minor squabbles. I forcefully shook off his hand in disgust and said, don't touch me. I find you dirty. Caught off guard, the things in Brian's hands rolled to the ground. The buns and porridge spilled all over. His face turned livid, and his eyes grew cold. He blocked my way again and said viciously, Summer, have you had enough? Aren't you done making a scene yet? I took 2 steps back to distance myself from him and sneered, can't you understand what I'm saying? Don't you know what breakup means? Then I'll say it one last time. After we break up, we act as if we don't know each other. Don't keep showing up in front of me like a sycophant. I stared into his eyes, saying each word earnestly. Anger welled up on Brian's face and grew stronger. His chest heaved with rage. He forcefully grabbed my arms with both hands, staring at me intently as if trying to find a trace of love in my eyes. Disappointed by the result, he suddenly went crazy, pressed me into his arms, and savagely bit my lips. The unique fragrance on him, mixed with a hint of jasmine scent, was nauseating. I struggled desperately. I forcefully kneed him in the groin. Brian hissed in pain, bent over halfway, and stepped back, looking at me with red eyes. Summer, you're heartless, many people were watching from a distance in the corridor. Brian accused me with a heart-broken look. You say break up just like that? How can you be so cold-blooded? I don't believe you'd break up with me just because of such a small thing. Unless you have someone else outside. I never thought Brian was so good at shifting the blame. He was being ambiguous with his first love, yet he wanted to pin the blame on me. Just as I was about to take out the video that Yo-Yo sent me, someone rushed out and said, "Young Master Brian, Yo-Yo has attempted suicide by cutting her wrists. She's lying in the hospital right now." Some people were giving her a hard time, and it pushed Yo-Yo to the verge of despair. "You'd better go and see her quickly. I'm afraid she'll do something stupid again when she wakes up." Brian didn't move. He stared straight at me, snorted, and said, "Don't think you're so charming. I've got no shortage of women. I won't indulge you. You're nothing at all. Let's see who dares to want you after leaving me." I put away my phone and said with a faint smile, "Mind your own business." Brian was so angry that the veins on his forehead were throbbing. I put away my phone and smiled faintly, saying, "Mind your own business." Brian was so angry that the veins on his temples were throbbing. He took out a ring box from his pocket, threw it away resentfully, and left with a fierce look. 9 in the afternoon, the rumors about me threatening Yo-Yo, driving her to suicide, and cheating on Brian became more and more outrageous. As soon as I walked out of the library, I was surrounded by several of Brian's little fans. One of them asked me arrogantly, "Summer, just because young Master Brian loves Yo-Yo more, you cuckolded him. How could you be so despicable? These crazy fans, geez." I stopped, locked my eyes on her face, and smiled. "Does Brian know he has a dog like you protecting him? Biting anyone you meet on the road? Is rabies kicking in?" She was so angry that her face was distorted and her eyes were blazing with anger. She shouted furiously, "You're worse than a dog. Have you forgotten how well young Master Brian treated you? You're an ungrateful and fickle slut." The others also chimed in, "You deserve to die. Young Master Brian just got back together with his first love, and you're so vicious that you want to ruin his reputation and make him a laughingstock. Young Master Brian is just nostalgic and sentimental. You should just gracefully make way for Yo-Yo. Why do you have to cause trouble and try to break them up? Summer, you're so vicious. You'll definitely end up badly." As they spoke, someone came to pull me, and their sharp nails dug into my arm. I instinctively shook her off, and the book in my hand hit her face. In the moment she screamed, I turned around and ran back to the library. Discretion is the better part of valor. Fighting 1 against 6, there's no chance of winning. Why endure this physical pain? Just as I stepped into the library, those few people chased in. "Summer, you're dead, stop," a stern shout interrupted them. The few girls were stunned and stood there, looking terrified. Behind me, several school leaders were staring at them sternly. I knew there was a school leader inspection today. In full view of everyone, gathering to bully someone would surely result in a demerit. After the leaders left, I walked up with a smile, scanned them, and said sarcastically, "You're really great at safeguarding Brian's love. It's all recorded in your files. But I'm warning you. Brian and I have broken up. His affairs have nothing to do with me. Don't mess with me again." A girl looked unwilling, clenched her hands tightly, and said through gritted teeth, "She's really shameless. Being dumped is one thing, but thinking she can win back young Master Brian by flirting around. She's daydreaming. I ignored them and walked out with my school bag. I could still vaguely hear the taunts behind me. Let's see what kind of losers she can find. She just got lucky and hooked up with young Master Brian. The past 3 years were probably her peak moments. She'll probably reminisce about it for a lifetime. When I walked out of the library door, I actually saw Max. He naturally took the book from my hand and said unceremoniously, "Treat me to a meal." Before I could say anything, the girl who followed out behind me exclaimed in a low voice, "Damn, this guy is so handsome." Summer got lucky again. Realizing something was wrong, she quickly added, "What's the use of just being handsome? Can he compare to our young Master Brian in terms of wealth, power, and charm?" Hee, speechless. 10 in the school cafeteria, Max's appearance attracted a lot of attention. After we sat down, the girls at the next table kept stealing glances at him and even took out their phones to secretly take pictures. Max acted as if nothing had happened and looked at me seriously, asking, "Inviting me to the cafeteria is to confirm the rumor that you have a new boyfriend?" I looked up and met his eyes, which were as deep as the sea. Wasn't it him who insisted on following me after I refused to treat him? This was so. I ignored him and lowered my head to continue drinking soup. Max is actually quite a contradictory person. When someone called me an orphan, he would teach those people a lesson. When someone bullied or targeted me, he would stand up for me. But then, he would often call me shameless and ask why I was still alive in this world. I'm also very complicated. I naively thought about resolving the conflict. I also thought that if after I pushed my mom away, the car that Max's mom ran into didn't make a sharp turn. If I had sacrificed myself, Max's mom wouldn't have died, and my mom wouldn't have died feeling guilty. How about we give it a try? Max continued to ask when he saw I didn't speak. His tone was relaxed, and it was hard to tell if he was serious or joking. You won't lose out. Being with me, Brian won't harass you anymore. Besides, we had a baby, betrothal in the first place. I also promised my dad that I'd take good care of you. Max's lips curved slightly, and he stared at me intently, as if discussing a business deal. I widened my eyes, finding it simply outrageous. Was this still the stubborn guy who, in order to protest Uncle Max's arranged marriage, ran abroad to study even after having his credit card stopped? Just as I was about to speak, a basketball flew over and landed on the table with a bang. Summer, who is this old guy? Brian rushed over with a furious face, glaring at Max. The food and dishes on the table were knocked over, and the soup splashed everywhere. I frowned irritably, feeling annoyed. Max slowly got up, walked to my side, took my hand, and carefully wiped it with a handkerchief. Who the hell gave you the guts to touch my woman? Are you tired of living? Brian was extremely angry. He forcefully pulled Max away and punched him in the face. Max laughed out of extreme anger and punched Brian back. The two of them refused to give in and fought as if they were going to kill each other. The surroundings became noisy, and no one dared to step forward to stop them. There were quite a few people watching and taking pictures. I took a deep breath, got up from my seat, picked up the basketball on the ground, and threw it hard at the two who were entangled. Have you had enough? I shouted angrily. With great effort, I separated the two and scolded Brian, "Are you crazy? We've broken up. Who I'm with has nothing to do with you. The video of you and Yo-Yo cuddling is still in my phone. Do you want me to play it right now for everyone to see who the cheater really is?" Hearing my words, Brian's face turned pale instantly. He hurriedly explained, "It's not what you saw." "I can explain." I said I loved her because, enough, I interrupted him, saying irritably, "I'm not interested in the details of your love affair. Stop bothering me. Can't we just part amicably?" After saying that, I pulled Max and was about to leave. Brian stepped forward to block our way, and his gaze landed on the arm I was using to pull Max. His eyes instantly turned red. His voice was choked with sobs as he sneered, "No wonder you don't care. You've already hooked up with this old man, haven't you?" Max was about to start fighting again. I quickly grabbed him and slapped Brian hard. "You really disgust me now. You're a coward who can't admit what you've done and always judge others by yourself. Brian, how could you become like this?" Brian looked at me in shock, both aggrieved and angry. He cursed viciously, "I disgust you? How high and mighty are you? You've already been played by me. Do you think you're so attractive? And you even got Yo-Yo into the hospital. I came here to make you go and apologize to her." He glanced at Max again and sneered, "Like being a mistress to an old man, huh? How much is he paying you?" "I'll pay double." With a bang, Brian's face was almost knocked sideways. Seeing that the two were about to fight again, I quickly pulled Max and ran away. After taking him to the infirmary for a simple treatment, I sent him away. He didn't mention that proposal again, and I just regarded it as a joke. 12 after one night, the video of Brian and Max fighting over me in the cafeteria sparked a heated discussion online. Yo-Yo couldn't sit still. She sent me a lot of photos, intimate pictures of her and Brian from various angles. There was even one of them lying on the bed, veiled and ambiguous. She sent me a voice message, scolding, "I advise you to have some self-awareness. Stay away from brother Brian. We love each other deeply. Don't think he fought because of you. He just thinks it's disgusting that you moved on so quickly. He said we'll get married after graduation this year. Stop being a slut and provoking him." The voices on the internet were also diverse. The campus belle Summer is really charming. Young Master Brian is jealous for her, and that man with an air of refinement is also protecting her. He's dressed in a sharp suit. Could he be the CEO of some company? Charming my ass. It's just a means to fight for favor. Threatening the first love, and then finding a gigolo to make young Master Brian less jealous. TSK, hard to comment. She's so scheming. No wonder she managed to charm young Master Brian for 3 years. Now that the first love is back, all her tricks and schemes are in vain. I shook my head and smiled. Except for the people directly involved, no one cares about the truth. They just want to vent their emotions. I have a friend studying abroad. I asked her to help me look into Yo-Yo's affairs. I don't believe this so-called depression at all. And I'm quite curious about her past with Brian. Since they loved each other so much, why did Brian say they had no feelings? At that time, I really believed him, thinking Brian wouldn't lie to me. I never expected that he would change completely after Yo-Yo came back. 13 I asked a lot of people and found out that Brian and Yo-Yo got together after the college entrance examination. They grew up together. Brian didn't like playing with girls, but he did take extra care of her. After Yo-Yo went abroad, Brian didn't date anyone. If someone introduced a girl to him, he would get angry. Everyone said he was waiting for her. He seemed quite affectionate. Before, I only heard that Brian remained chaste for his first love. Now that I know more details, it feels so ironic. It wasn't that he had nothing to say, but that he had nothing to say to me. My friend abroad also replied to me. She said, Yo-Yo has a really bad reputation. She has a chaotic relationship with both men and women. She dates several boyfriends at the same time, and she even cheats money and acts as a mistress. She's been beaten up several times. The most serious time, she seduced a married man and was almost beaten to death. She was almost sent to a mental hospital. At that time, I seemed to hear that she had mild depression. Not long after, her boyfriend in China took her back. This woman is really something. Her boyfriend in China treats her quite well. He often calls to care about her and sends her money. Calls, sends money. Brian is really a lovesick fool. If he had just waited for Yo-Yo like that all the time, I would have exclaimed that he was something. But he was dating me while secretly contacting his first love behind my back. He was treating me like a fool. Brian cheated on me and then shifted the blame to me. Yo-Yo framed me by faking a suicide attempt. In this regard, they really are a perfect match. However, I won't take the blame for something that's not my fault. Considering how well he treated me in the past, I decided to talk to them properly. I took some evidence I had collected. Either they come forward and clarify things themselves, or I'll post everything online. I heard that Yo-Yo was still in the hospital, so I specifically took a leave to go there. When I got to the door of the ward, Brian just opened the door and came out. When he saw me, his eyes lit up for a moment, but then, as if he thought of something, his face darkened again. He seemed to turn his eyes away in a fit of pique, silently confronting me. I saw a water cup in his hand. He should be going to get some water. I might as well get straight to the point. I need you and Yo-Yo to clarify the rumors and slander you've spread about me as soon as possible. 14. Hearing my voice, Yo-Yo quickly ran out from inside and looked at me warily. She put on an innocent look and said, "How can you casually smear others? When did we spread rumors about you? It was you who sent people to scold me and force me to leave Brother Brian. I didn't even hold it against you, but Brother Brian said you must be made to kneel and apologize. I thought you were here to apologize." I looked at Brian and sneered. Young Master Brian really has a lot of power. Without even getting the facts straight, you want to force me to kneel and apologize. You clearly cheated on me, but you're putting the blame on me. You really aren't afraid of me showing no mercy, are you? Brian stared at me sharply and sneered. So you didn't hook up with that old man? Do I have to catch you in bed with him to believe it? As soon as he finished speaking, I fiercely threw the printed photos in the folder at his face. Brian was stunned. He glanced at the ground, and when he saw the people in the photos clearly, his expression froze. Yo-Yo's face turned deathly pale. She panicked and picked up the photos scattered on the ground. She shouted out of control, "Are you crazy? This is an invasion of privacy. I'll sue you." Yo-Yo stood up, glared at me angrily, and shouted, "Using these photos to threaten people? Do you really think you can fight against us just because of your status?" Seeing them like this, I didn't plan to continue the communication. They were the ones who started being unkind, so don't blame me for being unrighteous. Just as I was about to leave, there was a sudden commotion on the other side of the corridor. Someone was shouting and running towards us. In the front was a woman in white. Chasing after her was a crazy old man holding a sledgehammer. Just as we clearly saw the situation, the woman suddenly pushed us aside, rushed into the ward, and locked the door from the inside. The old man rushed over right after. The sledgehammer in his hand was about to smash down. Yo-Yo happened to be in the way. Her eyes widened in horror. In the nick of time, she suddenly pulled me in front of her. At the same time, Brian pulled her into his arms. My mind went blank. Before I could react, I felt a sharp pain in my head and fell straight down. Before losing consciousness, I saw Brian's face. Vaguely, I also heard him shouting in a trembling voice, "Doctor, call the doctor quickly." 15. I was in a coma for a day and a night. When I woke up, I had amnesia. I could remember everyone else, but I just couldn't remember this person in front of me who claimed to be my boyfriend. Brian looked like he hadn't slept all night. He was unshaven and guarding by the bedside. When he saw me looking at him like a stranger, his eyes instantly turned red, and he cried out in despair. "How could you forget me? How could you forget me? We've been together for 3 years. There are so many memories. How could you forget just like that?" The doctor explained, "This is selective amnesia. The patient's head was hit, and she has selectively forgotten some people or things that she doesn't want to remember. With a certain period of treatment, there is a high possibility of recovery. Of course, it's also possible that she will forget permanently." Brian immediately retorted, shouting angrily, "Bullshit. How could it be permanent? She will definitely remember. I'll make her remember." As he said this, he got up excitedly and called to arrange for famous doctors from all over the country. As long as they could be invited, he asked people to invite them all, at all costs. The person who committed the act was also arrested. It was said that the woman came to the hospital to take care of her old lover, and the crazy old man found out. In a fit of rage, he went on a rampage. The old lover ran fast, and the crazy old man chased after the woman. Unfortunately, I was the one who got hurt. After I passed out, the security guards rushed over and subdued the crazy old man. Afterwards, Brian was extremely angry. He not only found the best lawyer to sue the old man, but also exposed their dirty deeds and some black materials he had collected to their relatives, friends, and work units. The woman lost her job, was kicked out of her home, and was pointed at by others. I was almost moved to tears. However, Yo-Yo, who used me as a shield, was safe and sound. She didn't even come to see me once, not even to say sorry. But when I went downstairs for a stroll, I saw her hugging a man and kissing passionately. That man was Brian. I almost believed that Brian was crazy about me. I didn't rush up to question him. Instead, I turned around and quietly went upstairs. Because at that moment, a sharp pain shot through my head, and the past memories came flooding back like a movie. So it was just a short-term amnesia. I was a little disappointed. If possible, I'd rather format this memory. Just as I was about to go through the discharge procedures myself, Max came. 16. He came running in a hurry. When he saw that I was okay, he let out a big sigh of relief. I was so scared, afraid that you'd forget me too. Max hugged me tightly with both arms, leaning over to my ear, his voice trembling. Seeing him like this, it always gave me an illusion that he loved me deeply. But now I don't care anymore. The love I want is not the kind that comes after careful consideration and weighing of pros and cons, but someone who can choose me without hesitation and resolutely. However, Max came at the right time. I was just thinking about how to get rid of Brian. Just as I finished going through the discharge procedures, Brian came back. When he saw Max was about to take me away, he rushed over, ready to flare up. But Max grabbed his collar first, punched him in the face, and cursed viciously, "What the hell were you doing taking care of her? If you can't protect her, stop pestering her. Take your little lover and get the hell out of here. Stop pretending to be a lovesick guy. Why don't you drag that bitch here to apologize?" Wow, since Max joined the company, I haven't heard him swear for a long time. Sure enough, no matter how noble and self-controlled he seems on the outside, there's always a hot-tempered gene buried inside. Brian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, glanced at me, his eyes full of self-blame and sadness. He pleaded with Max, looking a bit helpless. "I know you're her brother. I'm begging you. Don't take her away. Let me find someone to cure her. She doesn't remember me. She's forgotten me. How could she forget me?" Max pushed him away forcefully and sneered, "It's better that she forgets. You left her on the mountain in the rain for that bitch, and you let that bitch spread rumors and hurt her. Do you want her to remember and get hurt all over again?" Brian wanted to shake his head and explain. But when he saw my indifferent gaze, he knelt down on the ground in grief. Let him think I'm still suffering from amnesia. There's no need to get involved any further. After leaving the hospital, Max looked at me and hesitated. "If you want to recover your memory, I'll find the best doctors to treat you." Seeing his conflicted and worried expression, I smiled. He continued, "If you don't want to, that's okay too. Let the doctor do a thorough check. There shouldn't be any major problems, and it won't affect your life either. It's up to you to decide." I was too lazy to explain to him at first. But seeing him rambling on, being so serious and conflicted, I decided to say something. "I've regained my memory. I haven't forgotten anything. My mind is perfectly fine. Don't worry." He was stunned for a moment, stared at me intently, and then his brows relaxed into a smile. 17. After returning to school, the discussions about me stopped. Brian made a clarification online. He clearly listed his and Yo-Yo's infidelity and overstepping the boundaries, the misunderstandings about the relationship between Max and me, as well as Yo-Yo's framing and slandering of me. He presented it with solid evidence, and I took a rough look. They were all the pictures and materials I had organized. I originally took them for the negotiation, but unexpectedly, he used them first. This was fine, saving me the trouble of coming forward to prove myself. Otherwise, I would have been besieged by some crazy fans. The relationship between Max and me also reached a delicate balance. It was like we were neither too close nor too distant, like family. He often came to pick me up for meals, but most of the time, he ended up following me to the cafeteria. Only then did the people at school realize that the guy who was mistaken for a somewhat good-looking gigolo was actually the president of a well-known enterprise in the city. Even a large number of Brian's female fans switched sides. Brian also often came to try to get close to me. But I pretended not to know him, acting cold and distant. I hadn't seen Yo-Yo for a long time. I didn't know if she went abroad again, but I ran into her outside the school not long after. As soon as she saw me, she cursed angrily, "You bitch. You didn't lose your memory at all, did you? You're just pretending to be pitiful to win sympathy." I said lazily, "So what? It's none of your business." Summer, Brian suddenly appeared from behind and growled, "Are you deliberately playing with me for fun? Is it interesting to watch me suffer alone?" Damn it, this bastard heard me. I might as well go all out and chuckled, to be honest, apart from being a bit annoying, it's much more interesting than teasing a dog. Brian's eyes were red at the corners. He said mournfully, "Did you really love me? Why won't you even give me a chance to explain? The person I've always loved is you. I only regard her as a sister." Yo-Yo stood aside, clenching her hands tightly. Hearing this, she stared at me with hatred. I suddenly got interested and said to Brian, "Then explain." "I'm all ears." He was stunned, and a glimmer of hope flashed in his eyes. He started to talk about his helplessness. "She has severe depression. I gave in to her and everything just to stop her from doing something stupid. All the hardships she endured abroad were because of me. It was all my fault for getting drunk back then. I clearly promised to take responsibility for her. As a result, her mother was fired and had an accident. I also thought about confessing to you, but I was afraid you'd misunderstand." I laughed. This was having one's cake and eating it too. Brian couldn't let go of his guilt towards Yo-Yo, yet he didn't want to give up our relationship either. I sneered, "So you think I should understand you and accept your preference for her? I could be jealous but couldn't break up with you because of it, otherwise, I was being unreasonable." "Brian, who do you think you are? Just because your family has some money, you think everyone should fawn over you?" Brian closed his mouth, stopped talking, and hung his head dejectedly. After a moment, he said in a low voice, "I'm sorry." "What's the use of saying sorry?" I was so angry that I was breathing heavily. I was even angrier than when I first found out about his simple infidelity. That is to say, he might have known that Yo-Yo's unreasonable demands on him were wrong and that her framing and slandering of me were self-directed and self-acted. But in order to ease his guilt, his bottom-less tolerance is really ridiculous. I offer my final lament for the affection I wrongly bestowed. 18 Brian didn't appear in front of me for several consecutive days. Without his pestering, I had much more peace. However, Max has been subtly suggesting these days that he hopes we can be together. He said, "The best way to heal a broken heart is to start a new relationship. Rather than looking for someone else, it's better to choose me. At least we know each other well." I declined. I'm quite fine being alone. When I was immersed in my studies, Brian came to me again. He stood at my doorstep, carrying a large box of things. Inside were the gifts I had returned to him, necklaces, earrings, jewels, and that handmade cup which had obviously been broken and then repaired. He grinned widely and said to me, "Xia, I've retrieved all these gifts, not a single one is missing." As he spoke, Brian took out a box from his trouser pocket and said proudly, "This is the ring you threw on the mountain." I found it too. I took the box and opened it. Looking at the ring, I was in a daze. It was the ring we made for each other at a handicraft store on our first anniversary. I remember that after putting on the ring, he took a photo and posted it on Moments, saying, "The first diamond ring, the beginning of happiness. 1 ring a year, striving to collect 99 rings." I teased him that we might not even live to be 99 years old. He said, "This is my life goal. There has to be some threshold for efforts. If it doesn't work, we can continue in the next life." But in just the 3rd year, this so-called life goal was shattered. That day, after I threw away the ring, the last message I sent before blocking him was, "I've thrown away the ring." At that time, there was still a glimmer of hope in my heart. But until today, he never mentioned that ring. I thought he had acquiesced. I closed the ring box and stuffed it back into his arms, saying coldly, "I'm not a garbage collector. Once I decide to throw something away, I won't take it back." The hope in Brian's eyes vanished, and he looked a bit dejected. He forced himself to be energetic and said, "Then I'll make a new one for you. As long as you like it, I'll give you whatever you want. In the future, There is no future," I interrupted him forcefully. "We're already over. Stop pestering me. It's really annoying. If you don't leave, I'll call the security guard." Without paying any more attention to him, I directly opened the door and went in. Seeing Lucky's smiling face, I couldn't help but stroke its fur. I immediately relaxed. Why do I need a man? Nothing is better than Lucky. 19 in the evening, I went out for a walk with my dog. We were walking peacefully when Lucky suddenly barked wildly. I instinctively tightened the dog leash. At this moment, a person suddenly jumped out from the shadows and shouted viciously, "Summer, you bitch. Let's see how you can seduce men after I disfigure your face." Then I realized it was Yo-Yo, holding an unknown liquid and about to splash it on me. Before I could run away, Lucky broke free from the leash and pounced on her. The shrill scream was heart-stopping. Half of Yo-Yo's face was burned. The whole bottle of liquid was splashed on herself. It should be concentrated sulfuric acid. She who digs a pit for others falls into it herself. I pulled Lucky back and was hesitating whether to leave or make a call when Brian suddenly appeared. He took a look at the situation and must have guessed what happened. He said to me, "Sorry, I won't let her harass you again." Brian looked at Yo-Yo again, his eyes full of hatred as if he wanted to kill her. Finally, he dragged her away roughly. What a thrilling night. If I had really been disfigured, I don't know if I could have accepted it. Back home, thinking about it still made me scared. I owed it all to Lucky. I rubbed its soft head and gave it an extra meal as a midnight snack. When Max heard about this, he rushed back overnight. Only after he saw that I was really okay did he feel relieved. He said viciously, "Since Brian can't control his people, don't blame me for being ruthless." But before he could take action, we learned that Yo-Yo had been locked up in a private mental hospital by Brian. In such an environment, even a person without mental illness could end up getting one. Brian was really extreme. The more indulgent he was to Yo-Yo at the beginning, the more extreme he became now. But wasn't he at fault either? Later, I graduated smoothly and got a job in a foreign-owned enterprise that I liked. I no longer had any contact with Brian. I only heard that there were some problems with his family's company. At his father's request, he married a rich girl who liked him. Before long, they had a son and seemed to be living a good life. However, Brian might not be the type to be content with his marriage. He kept a mistress outside. After being discovered by the girl's elder brother, he was almost beaten to death. His position in the company was also revoked, and it almost led to a divorce, which would have affected the cooperation between the two families. Brian's father managed to smooth things over by promising to directly groom the grandson in the future, thus maintaining the relationship between the two families. Some people also said that the Mistress Brian kept resembled me. Playing the substitute game, who was he trying to disgust? I just took it as a joke and let it go in one ear and out the other. Max officially confessed to me several times, but I didn't agree. Later, he stopped bringing it up. We get together occasionally, like friends who are neither too close nor too distant. Once, when chatting with friends in the circle, I found out that it was Max who had suppressed the decline of the Xiang family. However, at that time, I didn't feel much about it. Now, with my job, friends, and Lucky, life is really free and wonderful.